They found each other on a morning the sea smelled like iron and rain. The whale shark came first, a pale shadow the size of a house moving under the coppery surface. He was old enough to remember tides before any boat had learned to mark the harbour. His spots were freckles of memory across a slow, enormous back. Fishermen called him Old Ledger because he carried the sea's accounts on his skin. The cat came later, clinging to driftwood no bigger than a slipper. He was hairless and pink as a turned coin, a sphinx with ears like satellite dishes and eyes the colour of green glass. Someone had seen him on the pier at dawn and thought he was a rag, a thing that had slipped from a pocket. No one had seen him launched into the water. All they knew was that he had been there, and then he wasn't. Old Ledger surfaced with a patience that belonged to deep water. He lifted his great mouth a fraction and breathed air he didn't need. His slow eyes slid up to a small, frantic shape paddling like a wind-up toy. He could have turned away. Whale sharks are filter feeders, indifferent to drama, but something in the cat's tiny clawed hands gripped Old Ledger's small heart. The cat sank the second time, water filling his ears, and Old Ledger did the only thing his size allowed. He rolled gently, nose up, and let the driftwood nestle in the creased skin behind his gill. The cat coughed, his whisker stumps trembling. For a long moment he did not move. Then he climbed, absurd and impossible, over a ridge of cartilage and onto the warm plateau of the shark's back. "Thank you," the cat said, voice raw and small as sea wrack. He blinked, shook himself like a dog despite the indignity of it, and found his legs. Old Ledger rumbled, a sound like distant surf. It might have been a laugh. It might have been the ocean testing its voice. He had no concern for the human sounds above. Men who fished, men who screamed, men who shouted about trophies and fortunes. But he had learned in all his years skimming the reefs that not everything that splashes should be left to drown. They did not have time to learn each other's names. They had other languages. Old Ledger's was currents and patience. The cat's was quick, bright gestures and a stubborn insistence on warmth. Still, the cat understood that the whale moved in a direction, and that direction was not toward the quay where men with nets waited. A harpoon boat was slicing through the mouth of the harbour when Old Ledger rolled beneath the surface and began to swim. The boat rode with a coarse arrogance. It carried a loud engine, a bumper of steel, and two men who had the kind of eyes that turned waves into cash. They had seen Old Ledger long enough to know the prize he might be, or simply the nuisance that could fetch a headline. They cut their speed into a chase. "Get eyes on him," one shouted. "He's out there, by the buoy." Old Ledger didn't run. He arced like a soft shadow, moving toward the open water, where the sea deepened and the sanctuary lay. An old marine reserve with quiet boys and human stewards who fed and mended and made sure that whales with histories and scars could rest. The sanctuary smelled like kelp and soup and old kindness. On his back, the cat curled furless skin pink and warm. He kept his claws hooked into the folds behind Old Ledger's gills, not out of fear, but for purchase. He could have leapt for shore. His species had a way of pretending the sea was a puddle, but he did not. Instead, he watched the harbour with a sailor's patience, tail flicking. "You can help," the cat said between breaths. "I can see where the men are looking. I can steer." Old Ledger's eye opened, an enormous pupil the colour of late evening. He did not speak in words. He tilted his head toward a back channel, a ribbon of current that cut behind the reef and would hide a whale from the sight lines of men on a boat. The current moved like a secret stair. It was narrow, shallow in places, threaded with rocks and kelp. A predator's trap, yes, but also a philosopher's path if you were careful. The cat hopped forward, balancing on a ridge of rough skin. He pointed with a sway of his body, ears flattened toward the cliff. Small paws beat the air, and then the cat began vocalizing in a cadence old Ledger understood. Staccato, then long. Left, left, now. In the only way a creature without words could say it. He peered into the water and watched the shadow of the harpoon boat where the men leaned on a wheel like an altar. They dove into the back channel like a needle slipping into cloth. The water closed above them. Rocks scratched old Ledger's belly, small abrasions, nothing he hadn't had before, but the current carried them. Above, the harpoon boat found a wall where the sea narrowed. The men cursed, throttled, and ran their engines until the hull whined. Old Ledger's spotted back was a passing ghost to them, the cat's ears small periscopes above. The sanctuary,